Good afternoon. My name is C.A. Webb, and I am the president of the Kendall Square Association. We are a community full of people on a mission, each with our own niche focus, but driven by a call to solve some of the world's biggest problems. Here in Kendall Square, we use data to unlock doors, science to advance healthcare, technology to support public health, all while educating our next generation of leaders. Organizations in Kendall Square are at the center of the global COVID-19 response, leading on vaccine and therapy development, contributing to PPE volume, and expanding testing to keep our schools, nursing homes, businesses, and public safe. Many of us are waiting with bated breath for the latest news on how and when we can access the 2 FDA-approved vaccines and when other vaccines will be approved. Today, we bring you the most up-to-date information straight from experts at 2 of Massachusetts' vaccine developers. During this hour, you'll hear how these leaders pivoted their technologies to fast-track vaccine development. To start off the meeting, I want to take just a moment to go over some details of this Zoom webinar. If you have any technical difficulties, please just post them in the Q&A and we will do our best to help you. During the panel, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions using that Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Please do post your questions as they occur to you, and also please upvote other people's questions so that we can prioritize the ones that generate the most interest. You can raise awareness and share what you've learned today on social by using hashtag #KendallOnTheFrontline. And to help us understand how vaccines are made, what we need to know about their efficacy, and how rollout plans look so far, I'm thrilled to welcome back Boston Globe reporter Shirley Leung. Shirley has tackled several pieces on the impacts of the pandemic, including how the Massachusetts miracle is alive and well, and has helped us overcome this unprecedented time. Over to you, Shirley.
Thank you, CA. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that you asked me back. Anyways, it's all about the vaccine these days, and we have 2 incredible experts on the topic. Many in the audience already pre-submitted questions, and I've actually incorporated a lot of them in our conversation today. So thank you for making my job easier. I'm going to interview each panelist separately. Margaret Ruesch's expertise is testing and manufacturing, while Rick Nettles' expertise is on the clinical side. And then I'm going to bring both of them together in the second half of this webinar to answer questions being submitted live during the panel. So again, if you want to ask a question, please submit through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So first up is Margaret. Margaret, Margaret Ruesch, can you flip on your camera? Hi, Margaret. Can you flip on your camera and unmute?
Yes, there we go.
There you are. So Margaret, hello. Margaret is a vice president in worldwide research and development at Pfizer. She leads a team that develops complex manufacturing and testing strategies for Pfizer's portfolio of therapeutics, gene therapies, and vaccines. She is also the R&D site leader at Pfizer's facility in Andover, where the company also does manufacturing. I'm not sure if you have any time to sleep these days, wearing so many hats. So I want to start off with Operation Warp Speed. Pfizer and other drug makers are breaking records, creating and developing and manufacturing these COVID vaccines. And usually it takes years, right, to bring a vaccine to market. So where were you able to speed up the process?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So you're right. Normally, vaccine development does take years, and that's due to a couple of things. One is, you need to conduct a large clinical trial, which involves a lot of follow through. And then a second reason that it can take some time is it does take us in the manufacturing and process development world some time to develop processes that allow us to make large amounts of the candidate vaccine. So I can definitely speak to the second one and how we've sped that up at Pfizer. We began working on the COVID-19 vaccine and trying to figure out how we could scale up or make, the manufacturing process with quality in mind. As soon as the project was announced, the partnership between Pfizer and BioNTech. And the way we've really sped it up is by doing things in parallel. So In the beginning, there were up to 4 different RNA constructs that were being tested, and we worked on how to manufacture each one of those in parallel. We did a lot of uh, advanced at-risk spending, both on equipment and raw materials, just so that we were ready to kick into gear our manufacturing as soon as a choice was made for the RNA candidate. We also have, we are a manufacturing development and manufacturing organization. We have a lot of ability to be flexible and pivot quickly to make a new candidate when the clinical data come to, are looking good. So we did have a lot of facilities already in place that allow us to quickly make new vaccine candidates. So we're able to leverage those. We have a new manufacturing facility in Andover where we were able to quickly be able to manufacture the RNA for the COVID vaccine. And then I think the last thing is we have a lot of scientific and engineering experts who we are able to pivot onto that program, right away, and train others and hire and backfill the gaps they've left on other programs, and really able to turn our expertise to quickly develop the ability to make and test and release vaccine product, really in record time.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about our Operation Warp Speed, is it the science and the clinical trials that got sped up, or the manufacturing that got sped up?
Yeah, it's both. So, I can speak less to the clinical trials, but in both areas, we worked very closely with regulators, to really make sure everything we're doing is transparent to them, that they had opportunity to provide feedback. In the case of clinical, it'd be clinical trial design. In the case of manufacturing, it's about the quality package that we'll be providing in the filing and how we plan to ensure vaccine consistency, how we're making it, what facilities we're using, what their status is in terms of good manufacturing practices. So that interaction with regulatory agencies in real time also enabled us to move quickly.
So both Pfizer and Moderna harnessed mRNA for the first time to develop a vaccine. And so what are some of the advantages for an mRNA-based vaccines, and how are they manufactured?
Yeah, so RNA vaccines do have some advantages in the manufacturing space. A traditional vaccine is made in a cell line, and it's typically a protein-based vaccine. So it takes time to develop a production cell line and establish that, scale that up, and make the protein in large quantities. The advantage of an RNA vaccine is you need the sequence that you want to make. So in this case, the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, and you can relatively rapidly turn that into RNA, which is a transient messenger of telling our cells how to make that spike protein so that we can mount an immune response. So it's a quicker, it's a cell-free process to get from the sequence you need to actual vaccine that you can put into a vial.
And what's being made in Andover? Is some of the vaccine being made in where you are?
Yes. So Andover plays a critical role in the vaccine manufacturing for Pfizer. We make the RNA, so the main ingredient of the vaccine in Andover. We work really closely with the large Pfizer global manufacturing network. We get the RNAs made by a process called in vitro transcription using a DNA template. That DNA template is made in a facility in St. Louis, Missouri. We get that, we make our RNA by in vitro transcription. We send that RNA to a facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where they do an encapsulation into lipid nanoparticles and filling into the final vaccine vial.
Great. And so do you see in the future more RNA-based vaccines or therapeutics coming down the pipeline?
Well, it certainly is exciting that the platform was validated and we saw such great efficacy for our RNA vaccine, as well as Moderna saw the same. So, I have no doubt that there will be more programs looked at. We have a flu program based on RNA platform. So it's definitely a really exciting time.
Right. So both the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna require ultra cold freezers, and I've been reading about how once the vials are open, it's kind of a use them or lose them situation. And so, there have been stories almost every day about this. And so, are you at Pfizer? Are you working on something to make the vaccine a bit more shelf stable, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is one of the perhaps challenges, is that in order to maintain quality over shelf life, it does require this frozen storage. So we certainly are considering how we could perhaps we're studying how it could be stored perhaps longer out of the freezer, or perhaps there could be a reformulation of some kind that would allow it to be stored at 2 to 8, such as freeze drying, refrigeration. So, that is something that's definitely we're looking at, not only, as potential for an improvement of this product, but also for future as well.
And is that I guess Moderna also has to be frozen, but I don't think they have the ultra cold storage requirement. The Pfizer do other vaccines need that too, or is that just something related to mRNA vaccines?
Yeah, I don't know the storage conditions for every vaccine, but I think, typically, of course, the desire is to have something that could be stored in a standard refrigerator. We study, as part of development, the storage conditions at which the product remains stable. And of course, that's of utmost importance to maintain that quality. So we do look at a variety of storage conditions, and we are continuing to do that to see if there's any more convenient options in the future.
So your expertise is manufacturing. So with so many people needing the vaccine globally, like right away, right? How concerned are you about a supply shortage?
Yeah, so I mean, we began manufacturing and preparation for manufacturing well before clinical data, so that we could have as much supply as possible. And we have important and large manufacturing targets this year. One of the great advantages of Pfizer is we have a lot of different facilities and capabilities to leverage to add capacity. So in the case of the RNA that we make in Andover, we're actually going in the process of adding an additional facility that can double the output of that RNA to help meet our targets. So our whole organization is really working 24/7 to make sure we make as many doses as possible.
Well, Margaret, thank you for telling us more about what you do at Pfizer and the mRNA vaccine. We're going to see you a bit, and now I'm going to welcome Rick Nettles onto the webinar.
Hello.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Oh, here you are. Hi. Hi, Rick. So Rick leads the U.S. Infectious Diseases and Vaccines Medical Affairs team at the Janssen Pharmaceutical Unit at Johnson & Johnson. He is focused on bringing critical therapies to people living with HIV and developing vaccines across multiple disease areas, including COVID-19. So Rick, the J&J vaccine is not out yet, but I think all of us are waiting for J&J to release clinical trial results, right, on the vaccine. And so tell us a little bit about that time frame and then what happens from there. Like, how soon after that, and let's say there's an FDA approval, how soon might we see the J&J vaccine option in the US?
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting us and including us in the conversation. So we have one major phase 3 clinical trial that's called Ensemble that we've announced that trial has been fully enrolled now. We've enrolled around 44,000 individuals across 3 different continents. We anticipate that we'll have the top line results of that trial by the end of this month. Then what happens from that time point, we would pull the file together, submit that to the FDA for their consideration for granting an emergency use authorization, as they did for Pfizer and for Moderna. We would obviously only do that if we're seeing results that show that the vaccine is safe and effective. But assuming that we receive those results, submit it to the FDA, what has happened in the previous examples is the FDA has then scheduled an advisory committee called VRPAC, and that usually happens about 2 to 3 weeks after a submission is made to the FDA. And in the previous instances, after the discussion at the advisory committee, the FDA granted emergency use authorization in the next day or two. So following that timeline, if we're able to show positive results from our phase 3 trial, you would have an emergency use authorization for the J&J vaccine by late February.
That's good. That's great. So we just heard from Margaret what Pfizer did to speed up the process. Can you tell the J&J? You must already be manufacturing a vaccine, right? So tell us a little bit what is happening on the J&J side to speed up this process.
Yeah, what a lot of the companies did is they took advantage of technology or platforms that they were already working on. So they weren't starting from scratch. And that's the same at J&J. So we use an adenovirus-based platform. And we have been using this platform to develop vaccines for Ebola, for HIV, respiratory syncytial virus, Zika, and others. And we've used this technology in over 200,000 individuals around the world. We received recently an approval for an Ebola vaccine using the adenovirus-based platform last summer in Europe. So that's one important thing is companies use technology that they had been working on for other vaccines and adapted them to developing a COVID vaccine. And then just like what Margaret mentioned, it was doing things in parallel, which in usual times are done in a serial manner. So we scaled up the production of the vaccine so that we were starting to produce very large quantities of it while we were conducting our phase 3 clinical trial. It's really important to leave everybody with the message that there were no corners cut with regard to the actual trials themselves. The FDA would respond very quickly to us, and so you're able to accelerate moving forward with these trials. But these are actually very large phase 3 clinical trials, larger than what you would usually see for other vaccine approvals. So with regard to cutting corners on safety, that did not happen.
And so also I wanted to remind people, I mean, this is not normal in that, drug companies, you don't normally just manufacture before an approval, right? I mean, the government, it's because the government agreed to buy the vaccines. I mean, is that, can you explain a little bit about that? I mean, and also, can this be replicated? I mean, why don't we do this for HIV vaccine or Ebola vaccine? I mean, do you see that happening, some kind of Operation Warp Speed for other diseases?
Well, as you say, you would be taking a financial risk in scaling up your manufacturing capabilities and then producing a large quantity of the vaccine before you even knew that your vaccine worked.
Right.
So you need to make those decisions, keeping in mind that if you do waste resources on something that fails, you could have invested those resources in something else, maybe a therapeutic for cancer or for an important immunologic disease. There are certainly some lessons we've learned that I hope will be able to accelerate future vaccines. But this is a really unique situation where the whole world is focusing a tremendous amount of resource on one disease. And it's appropriate for a pandemic. It may not be appropriate in other situations to neglect the development of other therapeutics or vaccines for the sake of developing one.
So how is the J&J vaccine, which I think has Boston roots with Dr. Dan Baruch, right, at Beth Israel?
Absolutely.
How is that different from the mRNA vaccine that Pfizer and Moderna have rolled out?
Well, all vaccines have a similar purpose, and that is to stimulate some type of an immune response or an immune memory, so that even when you've never been infected with the disease, as soon as you would encounter that virus in the real world, you would be able to mount an immune response and have immediate protection, prevent you from getting sick or lessen the disease. So all of the vaccines are going to have that same goal. The difference is how you actually spark that immune response. The J&J vaccine uses an adenovirus-based technology. So an adenovirus is a virus that causes common cold-like illness. We've taken that virus and made it so that it is replication incompetent. It's not able to replicate itself. And we've inserted a piece of the DNA of the spike protein of the coronavirus into that adenovirus. So the adenovirus is, in a sense, what we call a vector. It's the mechanism by which you get the piece of the coronavirus spike protein into the cell. The cell produces the proteins, and that's what elicits the immune response. So at the heart, what we're trying to do is the same between the two vaccines. It's just a different way of eliciting that immune response.
So, you know, a year ago when we were all talking about potential vaccine for COVID, you know, going through my mind was, oh, it must be so hard to find the right therapeutic, right? The right vaccine. And now we're learning, you know, maybe the hard part is actually, you know, getting shots in arms. And so, you know, the Biden administration has, you know, vowed to achieve 100 million vaccinations in 100 days. I mean, how realistic is that?
Well, I do think it's realistic. I think that what we're seeing now is more and more supply coming online. J&J isn't the only vaccine that's nearing the end of its phase 3 clinical trials. We have committed to deliver 100 million doses of our vaccine in an advanced purchase agreement with the US government. So, you know, this is one case where we're all in a race against the virus and cheering for each other. And the more companies that can come forward and bring additional supply, that's going to be critically important. And then what we see also is around the country scaling up of additional ways to deliver the vaccine in a more efficient way. It started small in hospitals, vaccinating healthcare providers and individuals living in long-term care facilities, but it's rapidly expanding out from that area. And so I think 100 million doses over the first 100 days is something that can be achieved.
Now, I've also started to read how, you know, 100 million is doable. So then, do you think the Biden plan is it not bold enough? Maybe we need to do more than 100 million. I mean, one thing that's unclear to me, if 100 million vaccinations, if it's the 2 shots, then maybe it's only 50 million people who get the vaccine in the first 100 days. But I mean, do you give us some numbers? Like, if we do achieve 100 million in 100 days, how many more people need to be vaccinated, or how much, or where do we go from there, I guess?
It's still to be determined. I think it depends on how many of these other vaccines are approved over the next several months, and how successful we are in bringing forward manufacturing at very high volumes of the vaccine. But I think if we're shooting for 100 million and we're highly successful on all fronts, we could surpass that number. But I don't have a specific number to give you that we could go potentially above and beyond that. I do think when we're talking about vaccinating, the FDA has taken a stance that for a 2-dose vaccination series, they're talking about people receiving both doses. That's what was been shown in the clinical trial to be effective.
So what are the biggest obstacles to a smooth rollout of the vaccines?
Well, I think it's just logistically very challenging to move around the vaccine at the scale that we're talking about, with hundreds of millions of people receiving the vaccine. There is, during this period of time and for the next short period of time, a situation where we have more demand for the vaccine than there is actually supply. And so in an orderly fashion, prioritizing who receives the first doses of the vaccine is important. And I see that is a challenge around the US right now, because it potentially causes confusion about when is my turn to receive the vaccine. That usually is driven out of the CDC, which there's a committee called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, or the ACIP, and they're putting out national guidelines which tell us who should be prioritized first. And then states have the ability to look at those guidelines and make some tweaks based on the specifics in their local geography. The last piece I would say is clearly communicating the science and the safety of the vaccine, so that individuals who may have concerns that this went too fast or that this is novel cutting edge technology feel more comfortable in receiving the vaccine and being reassured that corners weren't cut And this is something that's safe for me. So confidence in the vaccine is a very important issue that we need to tackle.
Well, Rick, thank you for spending some time on this, the topic of the clinical side of these vaccines. I'm going to welcome, stay on, don't leave. I'm going to welcome Margaret back onto the screen. And then I have a few questions for both of you, and I can see questions queuing up. So I'm going to ask a few questions, then I'll go to the live audience questions next. So, so have you guys gotten the vaccine?
So I can go first on that. So based on those prioritizations that we've said, I don't qualify to receive the vaccine yet. I can say that that 3 members of my family have received the vaccine because they qualified for it, and I would say unequivocally that I would love to receive the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, hopefully the J&J vaccine when I see the results.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Margaret?
Yeah, I have not. Same reason. And when I qualify, I look forward to receiving it for sure. And I do have some family members who are frontline workers who receive the vaccine, and it's great.
Right.
Looking forward.
So when it's all our turn, right, to get the vaccine, let's say late spring, the summer, will we have a choice in which one, to get? Can I say, well, I want the Pfizer one, or I want the Moderna one, or I want the J&J? Will I have a choice?
I think that in most instances you will not have a choice, particularly over the next weeks to months. That could evolve later in the year, but what I'm seeing most of the time for the time being is when you show up, there's one of the vaccines there, and that's the one that you receive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I guess for you guys, you hope you get your vaccine, right? You hope you get your company's vaccine, right? That's what you're hoping for.
I definitely have trust in the process, though, as Rick said. I think, yeah.
So how long, do we have a sense of how effective these vaccines will be? And it seems like there isn't a clear answer yet, but when will we know? And how is anyone monitoring how do you monitor the effectiveness of the vaccines?
I can make a quick comment. It's not, I'm not in the clinical space, but I know that we are following up with clinical trial participants for 2 years. As has been described in the trial design. So I think, it will take, Pfizer's definitely following up to understand how long that immunity lasts. Maybe Rick can comment as well on his.
Yeah, that's a very common question that we have. We don't know yet whether this will be a situation where you need to get a booster shot a year later, 6 months later, 5 years later. We just don't know yet.
So how do you monitor it? How do you check to make sure the vaccine is still working?
Yeah, just like what Margaret said, we're following the participants in our phase 3 clinical trial out to 2 years. Mm-hmm. The other important thing that's happening is we need to understand in this situation, what is the correlate of protection? And so scientifically, what that means is, can we understand what level of antibody is necessary to protect someone? And once we understand that, we are following participants in our trial and measuring the amount of antibody that remains in their system. So once we have a good feel for what is the thing that we can measure in the person's body that equals protection, we'll be able to understand how long your antibodies last and give you a better idea about when it would be the right time to get a booster.
You guys have talked a little bit about this, but not everyone is eager to get the vaccine, right? And so for those of us who have family or friends or colleagues who are nervous and concerned about the safety, what would you say to reassure them? I mean, Rick, you said a little bit about this, that there were no corners were cut on the clinical side, but what else can be said to reassure people?
Yeah, that's where I would start, is that the phase 3 clinical trials that support the approval of these vaccines are very large and statistically powered to find side effects of the vaccines that would occur. Most side effects of vaccines do occur in the first 2 months, which is why the FDA asked for at least 2 months median safety of the participants in the phase 3 trial. The other thing I would say is that the CDC and the FDA have very mature and robust pharmacovigilance systems where they're monitoring intensely these large number of individuals receiving the vaccines. So there's now been millions of individuals who've received this vaccine, and we have the systems that are in place to be able to track the safety. If there are emerging side effects, we will know it.
Mhm.
Now, I can mainly make a comment, from the area that I work in and oversee, and want to echo Rick's comment that, there have not been corners cut. So what we normally do for quality manufacturing and assurance of consistency and quality from lot to lot, extensive testing on each lot, all of those are standard for us for any vaccine, and we've put those all in place for this one as well. There's no reduced level of quality assurance.
So I'm going to jump to some of the questions that have popped up in the Q&A. So how will implementation of the Defense Production Act impact your manufacturing? And, will it, how quickly will you see the effect of that, that Production Act? But Biden, did he sign it already? Did he sign the Defense Production Act?
I was reading that was an executive order signed. I saw this question and found it a very good one. I don't necessarily have an answer other than to say, Pfizer has and continues to put all our potential manufacturing capabilities towards vaccine manufacturing, and recently have, new goals to make even more doses this year. So I don't have a specific answer for what the Defense Production Act will implicate for us. But
do you think it might, because there is so much emphasis on, attention on vaccine manufacturing already, maybe that act has an impact on other, other aspects of the pandemic. I don't know, whatever else needs to be made, like cotton swabs or something, I don't know.
Yeah, it did. Again, I'm just reading the news stories. It was geared as well towards PPE and things that are in short supply. Yeah.
Right. Rick, what is your sense? What kind of impact will the Defense Production Act have on vaccine manufacturing, if any?
Yeah, with many of these vaccines, when the manufacturer has signed an advance purchase agreement, we hand off the vaccine when it's been approved and authorized. And distribution of the vaccine is actually the responsibility of the government and distributors that they've contracted with. So I think you're right. I think what this does is really looks at that far end of the supply chain and removes any barriers there to getting the vaccine once it's been manufactured and approved out to actually get in the arms. I think that's where the area of focus will be in the near term.
Mm-hmm. Rick, you talked a little bit about this, about the two-shot vaccines. I know J&J is a single shot, but you said you felt comfortable talking about the two-shot vaccines as well that Pfizer and Moderna are doing. So I know that the clinical trials were the efficacy was based on 2 shots, right? But there's a lot of debate about should we just give 1 shot to as many people, under the theory that, some immunity is better than none. And so do you have do you see a situation or how could we get to a point, or at least to test whether or not it would be viable to go to a single shot with the 2-shot, or do you know if that's being even considered or tested in any way?
Well, I can let Margaret speak to the Pfizer and the approach, but in general, what the signals are from the FDA for the US is that they are strongly encouraging the use of the vaccine as it was studied and approved in your phase 3 clinical trial. And so I don't foresee in the near term, without additional data, that the FDA would be advising anything like what has been discussed, where you receive just 1 instead of the whole series. Mm-hmm. But I can't speak specifically to Pfizer or Moderna's situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's a question for Margaret or Rick. So why does the mRNA shots, why does it need 2 shots, and why does JJ only need 1?
So I think the trial was designed with 2 shots, and that's what the efficacy was proven. I do think there are situations in other vaccines where you might go and re-study if you can get away with fewer shots, but that of course is not available. And as Rick said, I think Pfizer's stated as well that, you know, recommendation is to follow the vaccine as authorized.
This is a question, let's see. With respect to the stories of wasted vaccines, you know, there was a story in the Globe today about some wasted vaccine at Jamaica Plain facility. I think I don't know if it was this facility or another, but where there was like a cleaning crew accidentally, you know, knocked the plug off or something like that to the freezer. And so some vials got, many vials got spoiled. And you hear similar stories of spoiled vaccine. So do you have a sense of what % of the supply is being wasted? And is this something that keeps you guys up at night? that there could be the hiccups in the rollout?
Well, certainly you do hear the stories, but I don't have data on that. I'm envisioning that it's a very small amount of the supply that's actually being wasted. But certainly this is critically important to us. Our vaccines need to be stored and transported in the conditions that we have achieved the approval under. So that is worrying to us as a company, and as individuals, I'm sure we're saddened when we hear that supply has been lost.
Yeah, and I certainly don't have any, as Rick said, you know, so well, and my role is really up to the point of vaccine ready for distribution, beyond which it does become the responsibility of those who are distributing it. But, you know, we do, we have, you know, removed all extra days for shipping, you know, expedited testing, and all taken all approaches we can to make sure that we're supplying as much vaccine as rapidly as possible. And internally, of course, we've had to establish that kind of storage and monitoring of freezers and things like that. So I can appreciate in some places there could be things that go wrong, but I don't have a percentage.
One last question from the Q&A, and then I'm going to go back to some of the other questions that came in earlier. So this person says, I know the vaccines have great effect at reducing the risk of severe health impacts. Are vaccinated people still capable of contracting and spreading the virus? What is the current understanding of this? This is for you, Rick.
Right, so all of the clinical trials have been designed slightly differently. One of the challenges with the coronavirus is you can have asymptomatic infection, and at the other end of the spectrum, obviously what we see is mortality. So you get this wide range of presentations of disease where you may not even know you're infected, and on the other end of the spectrum, it can kill you. Most of the trials were not designed to swab all of the participants' noses to see if they were asymptomatic carriers of the virus during our phase 3 trial. So that's one of the areas that we don't have enough information yet in the public domain on how likely is it that if you received the vaccine that you can still be infected and have asymptomatic situation and spread the disease. And so that's underlying the recommendations that even after you've received your vaccine, we're going to have to, for the time being, continue to socially distance and wear masks and practice the hygiene that we've become accustomed to. We should have more information about that as time goes by.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of 2021, when many people are vaccinated, you anticipate that we'll still be wearing masks and social distancing by the end of the year?
I think that it really depends on how effective the vaccines are, how many people receive the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's still yet to be told on how long we're going to have to do these things. If there's a really high success rate with the vaccines and a high uptake rate, there is the possibility that life could return more to what we were used to before this year, by the end of this year.
Mm-hmm. And so, you know, how will we know the efficacy of the vaccine? I mean, will companies like Pfizer and J&J, will you put out a bulletin, latest update from the clinical trial people that we've been following, this is what we learned. I mean, are there standards in which you can instantly report this out?
Yeah, one of the nice advancements that we've seen over the past year is around data transparency. And so in the medical field, certainly the gold standard is publishing data in peer-reviewed journals, and that continues. But in this extraordinary year, the other thing that has happened is companies are making important data available on web servers even before they've been peer-reviewed. And so I'm sure that type of practice will continue for the sake of transparency. When there's any major news that the world needs to know, that it will be made available.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I agree. Pfizer is really committed and provided data and as close to real time as possible as it's been available. And I'm not involved in the clinical area, so I wait and get the same press releases, and just encourage people. It is quite a bit of it is available in press releases and links and things on the Pfizer website. Yeah, I saw some questions about new variants and things like that, and there is even a press statement and some data available on the Pfizer website about those as well.
Yeah, I was going to say with the UK strain, and there's probably more strains. I'm not South Africa strain. So what happens on your side? I mean, it's both Pfizer and J&J are all the companies taking those strains and testing them testing with your vaccines to see if they're effective.
So yeah, so I can comment. There was some data that Pfizer shared on just in vitro, looking to see if we would expect the antibodies formed after vaccination would cover any of these new strains. And that, so from a manufacturing and readiness perspective, what I can say is we certainly are laying the groundwork to be able to, manufacture, if required, a different sequence. If it turns out that it appears that, if it's not being covered by the vaccine. But I know the clinical groups and, other scientists are actively studying that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Same at J&J, we're working to confirm in vitro that it appears that the vaccine has the potential to neutralize all of the variants. One advantage of the Ensemble trial being later in time as compared to the earlier trials is that we should have some actual clinical efficacy data in our phase 3 trial on several of the important variants. So hopefully we'll be able to include that data along the time frame that I discussed at the beginning of the talk.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a super stupid question. What do you mean by in vitro? Can you explain a little bit about, in vitro versus human clinical trials, and does it matter, how you can test the efficacy of the vaccine?
Do you want that one, Margaret? Or
Sure. Yeah. So in vitro just means, I think literally means like in a petri dish, so to speak. So it's just you can look at antibodies that neutralize the current known strain of COVID and see if they also bind and therefore likely neutralize any additional new strains that have that sort of individual amino acid changes in the spike protein. So it's just it's a study in the lab.
Great. And so if most, let's say in the US, if most people are vaccinated by the end of the year, right? Does this mean that we can all return to the workplace? And a lot of people here are probably, manage, offices in Kendall Square, and so and work in Kendall Square, and so what advice do you have employers who are drawing up plans for return to the office? I mean, if everyone's vaccinating, is it vaccinated by the end of the year? Does that mean that it'll be back to normal by the end of the year?
Might be a Rick question.
Well, I think that what we're going to need to do is watch the amount of virus that's still spreading in the community. And those figures are available in every county around the US. And so I think you'll have a good idea about when schools are going to reopen and when businesses can fully reopen, when the average number of infections every day are markedly reduced from the area that they are now. And so once we have achieved a large number of individuals who've been vaccinated and we've achieved this idea of herd immunity, you'll see that those case rates fall. And when they fall to a very low level, that's when you'll know that sort of it's a time when you can go back to work without all of these measures in place that currently are needed to sustain in-person activities.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like 2022, right?
It's one thing about the coronavirus is it's very, very hard to predict.
Wow.
But you know, if we are successful in vaccinating a large number of people, and the vaccines work as they did in the phase 3 trial, I hope that it's sooner than that.
At the same time, though, a lot of us like working from home, so maybe we're not rushing to go back 5 days a week. So we have another question from the audience. Is and this is a question that came up that I'm watching very closely. Is you know, with Moderna and Pfizer, and I think in J&J, you guys have not in the initial clinical trials, you did not have kids in them, and so when have the clinical studies on kids started yet?
I can answer that one first. So we've used our adenovirus-based platform in children down to infants 4 months of age for other vaccines. In particular, our Ebola vaccine has been used in children extensively. So we do have confidence that the adenovirus-based approach can proceed into younger ages. Our initial ensemble trial was 18 years of age and older. And then traditionally what you'll see is an age de-escalation where then you would show that the vaccine is safe in the adolescent age range. And then you go down as you confirm that the vaccine is safe in a child population. So we do intend to do that this year as soon as we're sure that the vaccine is safe and effective in adults.
Yeah, and trials for the Pfizer vaccine in 12 to 15-year-olds and 16 to 17-year-olds are ongoing.
And so, yeah, so do you anticipate that, I guess, teenagers and maybe perhaps younger, you know, elementary school, will they get the vaccine by the end of the year or probably more like next year?
I think that'll depend on the rollout plans that the states and local governments have and aligned with what vaccines are authorized for use in that population. But maybe Rick can comment further.
Yeah, I would agree. It depends on how quickly the clinical trials that are ongoing yield results. And if they're found to be safe and effective, then the FDA would have to grant approval in those age ranges. And then you would have to assume that the supply of vaccine is available to start to vaccinate children.
I see. So there's a question here about the flu shot, you know, has a 60% efficacy is enough. Like you don't have to have I guess a high efficacy with the flu shot. Correct me if this is, someone correct me if that's not right, but anyways, I'm just reading this question. But of course, COVID is a deadly disease and highly infectious disease. So perhaps that's why we need 2 shots to get to 95% efficacy. But you know, could we go down to 1 shot so it's only maybe 70 or 80% effective? Maybe that's maybe that's the strategy rather than 95%. I don't know, Rick, if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, ours is a 1-shot vaccine, so it's not necessarily relevant to us. But again, I think as manufacturers, when we speak, we really need to speak on how the FDA approved our medication. And the FDA currently has approved vaccines with, you know, it's a 2-shot series and you should receive the 2nd shot within this window of time. And as manufacturers, that's really what we can speak to without speaking specifically about another company's vaccine. I don't want to speak for Margaret.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Again, I think it's been, yeah, Pfizer has been very clear how the vaccine was studied and what its current authorization requires in terms of doses. Yeah.
All right, we've got some more questions. I'm going through here. Let's see. Okay, so this is a question about, Rick, you had mentioned there are certain lessons learned from the rapid rollout or development, I guess, of the COVID vaccine that could be applied to other vaccines and so to fight other diseases. So if you could talk a little bit, is it possible to take what we've learned in developing the COVID vaccine to possibly expedite and get a vaccine for the HIV or even the common cold?
Yeah. Importantly, every infection, every virus or bacterial infection is unique. And so just because we've been successful in developing vaccines against coronavirus very quickly, that level of success is not predictable for all of the other vaccines. So for instance, in the HIV situation, that is a virus that is able to mutate and cloak itself very rapidly. And we've seen multiple large late-stage clinical trials in the HIV realm fail. So unfortunately, I would be able to say that, that we've learned how to scale up our platforms, how to manufacture large quantities of the vaccine, but predicting the success for each individual vaccine that we're working on is still going to take a lot of hard work. J&J is working on a phase 3 HIV vaccine, and we have our fingers crossed that will work, but I think it's too early to say just because we've been successful against COVID-19 that we would then be successful against other infections. We're hopeful, but we're realistic.
Yeah, and I think on the manufacturing front, our even outside of COVID-19 vaccine, our role in pharmaceutical sciences and manufacturing is to, continuously improve how we can make important medicines that patients are waiting for, vaccines or otherwise, with speed and quality. And we are constantly, incorporating lessons learned on how we can, really enable clinical trials and approvals and supply as fast as possible. So we definitely have in every program, including this one, lessons learned about, it really worked well to do these things in parallel, and this system worked better. We have sort of technologies that let us plug and play, make a different vaccine that's similar, test it with similar methods, but they've been, modified or verified to be relevant to that new vaccine product. So that's definitely part of what our role is all the time in the manufacturing and process development space. And we have lots of great success stories and lessons learned from our success here as well.
All right, so I have one last question, and this is such a Kendall Square, Kendall Square question. So anyways, it's very technical. Luckily, I can just read it. So is part of the reasons for the rapid development of these vaccines at this point in history due to all of the science done in mapping the human genome from the 90s? And so the vaccine technology that drug companies have invested in the 2000 and 2010s and cloud computing for rapid analysis. So basically, we're here at this moment because of all the incredible advances that happened in the 20 years prior.
I would say there's a great deal of truth in that. The ability to, even from the start of the outbreak, to release the genetic sequence of the virus is something that wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. And so, yes, I think the advancement in science and technology and our as we both mentioned, the work that had been going on already on RNA-based vaccines or adenovirus vaccines allowed us to get a jump on this. So certainly, I think that there's a lot of truth in that statement.
Yeah, and a lot of those technologies really are brought to bear on, again, quality testing and assurance of our vaccine supply. So I've been in industry quite a while, and obviously techniques in molecular biology and analytical testing and have come a long way, and we can rapidly confirm that every lot we make is the right sequence, and put a lot of that high-end technology that is the product of years of development towards making sure that the processes we develop make high quality vaccine and every batch meets those quality requirements.
Mhm. Well, we are rapidly out of time. I have to say I'm in awe of the scientific community for what you've done in creating a vaccine, developing a vaccine, and now rolling out the vaccine. I'm sure you guys have had many sleepless nights in 2020, and unfortunately, I think 2021 will also be another nerve-wracking year. No doubt, as because this virus is very smart, right? It's but I think we have the brains to outsmart it. So thank you, Rick. Thank you, Margaret, for your time. I'm gonna I think we're all gonna turn off our cameras and we're gonna hand it back to CA.
Thank
Shirley,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Rick, for sharing your expertise with us today. Please convey our thanks to your colleagues. We are just so grateful for the important work that you're all doing to protect people across the globe. I'm glad that the Kendall Square Association can help shine a light on what scientists and leaders here are doing to make vaccines effective, safe, and accessible. It is a big week for Kendall Square. Many of you know that this week we sent off a couple of our beloved scientific leaders, Eric Lander from Broad Institute and Maria Zuber from MIT to Washington. And there are many more scientific leaders who will become involved in this new administration as we work to speed up our fight against this pandemic. Thank you to my colleagues, Abby, Valentina, and Alana for making today's event possible. Please follow us online to get summary notes and exchange more information and keep this conversation going. Knowing we could not get to all of your questions today, we have recorded this conversation and we will connect with other Kendall leaders and get answers to you in the coming weeks. We do encourage you to keep the conversation going using the hashtag #KendallOnTheFrontline. Please let us know what else you'd like to learn about COVID-19. Some of you joined us for our session on testing last month. We're planning another session coming up next month on PPE, new emerging technologies for public health. And to stay up to date on our latest COVID-19 innovations, please sign up for our weekly newsletter and follow us on social. Kendall continues to lead through action on the important issues facing our nation and our workplaces. To get involved with more Kendall Square Association programming, like the Future of How We Work, or our professional development program, Inclusion Drives Innovation, please help, which helps organizations meet their diversity and inclusion pledges as we all work to build anti-racist workplaces. Please visit us at kendallsquare.org. Please join the Kendall Square scientific community in putting public health first and staying safe this winter. I wish you all a very happy and healthy weekend. Thank you.